Welcome back, everyone. We're diving into a topic today that a lot of you have been asking about, Christian perspectives on parenthood.
Yeah, it's one that, it's a big one.
It's a big
It
one.
covers a lot of ground.
It really does. And we've got a ton of material to sift through. Articles, theological reflections, even a historical analysis of how families have been viewed over time. It's pretty fascinating stuff.
Oh, for sure.
But I think what our listeners really want to know is, where do we even begin with this? What are the core ideas?
Right. What are we even talking about when we say Christian parenthood?
Exactly. So let's start with something that popped up a lot in our source material, this idea of a natural child.
Yeah, that's an interesting one. A lot of the articles pointed back to Genesis, that whole be fruitful and multiply thing.
Right. Genesis 9.7,
Mm,
that's the OG procreation mandate,
right,
right?
right.
But it's not always that simple, is it?
Definitely not. I mean, we're not living in a pre-industrial society anymore. People are thinking about family planning, environmental concerns, their own personal choices about how many kids they want to have, if any.
So how does this material deal with those modern realities? Does it just say, nope, gotta have as many kids as possible?
Well, there are definitely some more conservative interpretations that lean that way. They see Genesis as a direct command, no room for interpretation. But there are also other theologians who say, hold on, it's not just about quantity, it's about the quality of parenting, about creating a loving and nurturing environment.
I mean, that makes sense, right?
Yeah.
It's not just about popping out babies, it's about raising them well.
Exactly. It's about intentionality. It's about recognizing that children are a gift, a blessing, and that raising them is a sacred responsibility.
So we've got this foundation of children as a blessing from God. But there are different ways of understanding what that looks like in practice. Okay, I'm with you so far. But what about families that are formed through adoption? Does this source material address that at all?
It does, and it's actually pretty fascinating. One of the articles dives into the history of adoption within Christianity, tracing it all the way back to the early church. Apparently, in Roman society, it was really common to just abandon unwanted infants.
Oh, wow. That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it was a really rough time for a lot of kids, but Christians saw it as their duty to take those children in, to care for them as their own. It was this radical act of love and defiance against the norms of the time.
That's amazing. So they were basically going against the grain saying, no, every child deserves a family. But did they see adopted children as fully equal to biological children? Or was there still some kind of hierarchy there?
That's a really good question. And to be honest, the source material isn't entirely clear on that. Some scholars think there might have been a distinction, with biological children still having a slightly higher status.
Interesting. So maybe some remnants of those old Roman ideas were still lingering.
Perhaps, but then again, there are also accounts of adopted children inheriting property and titles, which suggests they were fully integrated into the family. So it's a bit of a mixed bag.
A mixed bag, yeah. I guess that's how it often is with history, right? Lots of nuances and complexities.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating how those historical perspectives can inform how we understand these concepts today.
Yeah, totally. It gives us a broader context.
So we've talked about the natural child idea and adoption, but what about blended families? I mean, we see so many families formed through remarriage and step-parenting these days. How does this material address that?
It mostly approaches it through the lens of Deuteronomy, specifically those passages dealing with remarriage and the responsibilities of step-parents. It's not really about condoning or condemning blended families, but more about focusing on the importance of treating all children with love and fairness, regardless of their biological connection.
Okay, so it's not about erasing those distinctions, but rather acknowledging them while still emphasizing those core values of love and unity within the family. Makes sense. But speaking of complex family structures, what about families formed through assisted reproductive technologies, like IVF, for example? That's a whole other can of worms, right?
Oh, yeah. And the source material really gets into the theological weeds on that one. You've got some theologians who argue that IVF is a violation of God's natural order, that we're messing with things we shouldn't be.
I can see where they're coming from, especially with that emphasis on procreation as a divine gift.
Hmm.
But surely there are other perspectives within Christianity. I mean,
Mhm.
technology has advanced so much, and a lot of couples see IVF as a blessing, a way to overcome infertility and experience the joys of parenthood.
Oh, absolutely. And the source material definitely presents those alternative viewpoints. One of the theological reflections actually argues that God gave us intellect and ingenuity, and that using those gifts to overcome challenges, including infertility, can be seen as a form of stewardship. Like we're using what we've been given for good. Yeah.
So it's not necessarily seeing technology as the enemy, but rather as a potential tool for good, a way to cooperate with God's plan.
Exactly. It's about discerning how to use these advancements responsibly and ethically.
Okay, so we've got these opposing viewpoints, both rooted in Scripture, but arriving at very different conclusions. That's a lot to unpack. But before we get too deep into the ethical considerations, let's take a step back and look at the bigger picture. What does this material say about the overall calling of Christian parenthood? What are the core values and goals that underpin this approach to raising children?
Well, one of the big themes that emerges is this idea of parenting as discipleship. Like, it's about shaping the next generation in faith, guiding them toward a life centered on Christ. It's not just about providing for their physical needs, but nurturing their spiritual growth as well.
That's such an important distinction. It's not just about raising good kids, but about raising kids who are grounded in their faith and equipped to live out their beliefs in the world. But how does that actually play out in everyday life? What are some of the practical implications of this discipleship-focused approach to parenting?
Well, that's where things get really interesting because the source material doesn't offer a one-size-fits-all answer. It acknowledges that there's a lot of diversity in family structures, cultural contexts, even just personalities within families.
Right. I mean, what works for one family might not work for another. So how does the material provide guidance without being overly prescriptive? What are some of the key principles that come through?
One of the central ideas is the importance of creating a home environment that reflects Christian values. It's about modeling faith in your everyday life, having open conversations about spirituality, and integrating faith into family rituals and traditions.
So it's not just about Sunday school and Bible stories, but about weaving faith into the fabric of daily life. That's a powerful concept. But what about discipline? That's a topic that often comes up in discussions about Christian parenting. What's the approach outlined in this material?
One of the articles really dives into the biblical principles of discipline, emphasizing the importance of love and correction. It's not about punishment for its own sake, but about guiding children towards right behavior and helping them understand the consequences of their choices.
So it's about setting boundaries and providing structure, but always within a framework of love and understanding. That's a delicate balance to strike, isn't it? What about the role of the church community in all of this? Does the source material address that at all?
It does, and it really emphasizes the importance of surrounding families with a supportive network of fellow believers. It's about having mentors, role models, and people who can offer encouragement and guidance along the way.
That's so important. Because let's face it, parenting can be tough, and having a community to lean on can make all the difference. But what about the specific challenges faced by families in today's world? I mean, we're dealing with a lot of social and cultural shifts that impact how we raise our kids. Does the source material offer any insights on navigating those complexities?
It does, and it really encourages parents to engage thoughtfully with the culture, to be aware of the influences shaping their children's worldview, and to equip them to make wise choices in a world that's constantly changing.
Okay, so we're talking about being proactive, about having those tough conversations, and about preparing our kids to face the challenges of the world while remaining grounded in their faith. That's a tall order.
Yeah.
But before we get too overwhelmed, let's take a quick break and come back to discuss the specific challenges and joys of parenting in different family structures. We'll delve into the unique experiences of adoptive families, blended families, and families who have chosen to pursue assisted reproductive technologies. Stay tuned. Okay, we're back, and we're ready to get into the nitty-gritty of parenting in different family structures. You know, we've talked about those biblical foundations and that whole idea of discipleship, but let's get real. How does this all play out for families who've, taken different paths to parenthood? Let's start with adoption. What are some of the unique joys and challenges that adoptive families face?
Well, one thing that really stuck with me from the source material was this emphasis on acknowledging the child's story, like their history, even if there are a lot of unknowns.
Yeah, that makes sense.
It's about honoring their past, their cultural heritage, if you know it, and helping them integrate that into their present identity.
Right. It's not about pretending that the adoption story doesn't exist. It's about embracing it as part of who they are. But I imagine that can be really complex, especially if there's trauma or loss involved.
Absolutely. And the source material talks about the importance of seeking professional guidance, therapy, support groups, things like that, especially ones that are tailored to adoptive families.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because there are some unique dynamics at play there.
Definitely. And parents need to be equipped to navigate those with sensitivity and wisdom.
So it's about recognizing that adoption isn't always a fairy tale ending, that there can be some real struggles, but it's also about approaching those challenges with love, support, and a willingness to learn and grow alongside your child.
Exactly.
That's powerful stuff. What about blended families? I imagine there are some unique challenges there too, especially when it comes to step parenting and navigating different parenting styles.
For sure. And the source material offers some really practical advice for blended families. Like it emphasizes the importance of clear communication and, setting realistic expectations.
Yeah, that sounds crucial.
It also encourages step parents to approach their role with humility, recognizing that they're not there to replace a biological parent. It's about building a new relationship with the child.
That's a really important distinction. It's about finding your place within the existing family dynamic, respecting that bond between the child and their biological parents, and creating space for new connections to form. But I imagine that takes time.
Oh, definitely. And the source material acknowledges that. It says blending families is a process, not an overnight transformation.
Yeah, it's not like flipping a switch.
Right. And it encourages families to seek counseling, have those open and honest conversations about their feelings, and to celebrate those small victories along the way.
Okay, so we've got adoption, blended families. Now let's talk about families formed through assisted reproductive technologies, like IVF. I know this is a topic that can generate some strong opinions and ethical debates, so I'm curious to hear how the source material approaches this one.
Yeah, it's a sensitive subject for sure. And the source material approaches it with a lot of nuance. Like it acknowledges the complex emotions and ethical dilemmas that can come up for Christian couples who are considering IVF.
So it's not just a black and white issue.
Not at all. It doesn't offer a simple yes or no answer. Instead, it encourages couples to, engage in prayerful discernment, seeking God's guidance as they weigh their options.
That's good. It's acknowledging that there's no one-size-fits-all answer, that each couple's journey is unique.
Exactly.
But what about those potential ethical concerns? I know some Christian denominations have really strong stances against IVF, citing concerns about the creation and destruction of embryos, for example. Does the source material address that?
It does. It presents different theological perspectives on the moral status of embryos. It outlines the arguments for and against IVF, and it does so with a lot of sensitivity and respect.
So it's not about pushing a particular agenda, but about presenting those different viewpoints and allowing couples to, grapple with those complexities as they make their own decisions.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to put it.
Okay. But once a couple decides to pursue IVF, what kind of support does the source material offer? Like, what does it say about navigating that process?
Well, it talks about the importance of finding a fertility clinic that aligns with your values, a medical team that respects your beliefs,
That makes sense.
and also finding a support system that understands the unique challenges of IVF.
Right, because it is a unique journey.
It also highlights the emotional roller coaster that often comes with IVF. The ups and downs, the waiting, the uncertainty.
So there's a lot of emphasis on the emotional and spiritual aspects, not just the medical side of things.
Exactly. And it encourages couples to seek counseling and to find healthy coping mechanisms for the stress that can come up.
That's so important. It's a lot to handle.
It really is.
But what about families who are successful in conceiving through IVF? What are some of the unique challenges they might face as they navigate parenthood?
Well, one interesting point the source material brings up is the potential for identity issues, particularly for children who were conceived using donor sperm or eggs.
Ah, that's an interesting angle.
Yeah, and it encourages parents to be open and honest with their children about their conception story.
Yeah.
Answering their questions in an age-appropriate way.
Right, so normalizing those conversations from an early age.
Exactly. It's about creating a safe space for those kids to explore their identity and understand their origins.
But that can be tricky, right? Especially when you're trying to explain complex concepts like donor conception to a young child.
Oh, absolutely. And the source material offers some helpful resources for those conversations, like books, websites, support groups, all specifically for families who have experienced donor conception.
Oh, that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's a great starting point. And it also encourages parents to be sensitive to their child's feelings, recognizing that this information can be really emotionally charged.
Right, it might take some time for them to process it all.
Hmm.
What about the legal and ethical considerations? I know there are some ongoing debates about donor anonymity and the rights of donor-conceived children. Does the source material touch on any of that?
It does, and it acknowledges that those are really complex issues with no easy answers. It basically encourages parents to do their homework, be aware of the laws in their jurisdiction, consider the potential implications for their child's future, and ultimately make informed decisions that prioritize their child's well-being.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. From the biblical foundations of Christian parenthood to the unique challenges and joys of different family structures. It's clear that there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Every family's journey is going to be different. And navigating these complexities requires a lot of grace, a lot of wisdom, and a willingness to seek guidance and support. But before we wrap things up, I want to circle back to that theme of discipleship. How does the source material suggest that parents can effectively instill faith in their children, regardless of their family structure?
One of the key takeaways is the importance of modeling authentic faith in your everyday life. It's not just about telling children what to believe, but about showing them what it means to live out your faith in practical ways.
So it's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. It's about being transparent about your own struggles and doubts, demonstrating forgiveness and grace in your relationships. It's about showing your kids how faith can inform your decisions and actions in the real world.
That's powerful. It's about creating a lived experience of faith, a home environment where kids can see faith in action and understand how it can shape their own lives. But what about the specific challenges of raising children in a culture that often seems at odds with Christian values? How do parents equip their kids to navigate those tensions?
It encourages parents to engage in those open and honest conversations about, the challenges of living out your faith in a secular world.
Yeah, those conversations can be tough.
They can be, but it's about equipping children with those critical thinking skills, helping them understand different perspectives, and teaching them to articulate their own beliefs with confidence and respect.
So it's not about sheltering them from the world, but about preparing them to engage with it thoughtfully
Right.
and to stand firm in their convictions. That's a tall order.
It is, but it's also incredibly rewarding to see your children develop into those strong, compassionate, faith-filled individuals.
And I think that's where the source material really shines. It doesn't sugarcoat the challenges, but it also doesn't shy away from the profound joy and fulfillment that comes with raising children, witnessing them grow and learn and discover their place in the world.
Yeah, for sure. It's about celebrating those milestones, both big and small, cherishing those moments of laughter and connection, and holding on to hope even when things feel uncertain or overwhelming.
It's about trusting that God is working in and through our families, even when we can't see the bigger picture. And that's a message I think we all need to hear no matter what stage of parenthood we're in.
Absolutely. Christian parenthood is a journey, not a destination. It's a process of growth, discovery, and grace, both for the parent and the child. It's about creating a loving and supportive environment where children can thrive, explore their faith, and develop into the individuals God created them to be.
That's beautifully said, and it really speaks to the heart of what we've been talking about today. So to all our listeners out there, no matter where you are on your parenting journey, know that you're not alone. You've got a whole community of believers cheering you on, praying for you, and walking alongside you. And most importantly, you've got God. He's with you every step of the way.
Amen to that. He is.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Christian perspectives on parenthood. We hope it's been insightful, encouraging, and maybe even a little bit challenging for you.
We hope it sparks some meaningful conversations and reflections within your own families, because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. Sharing our experiences, learning from one another, and growing together in faith.
And until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep embracing the beautiful messiness of parenthood. We'll see you on our next deep dive.
So we've explored a lot in this deep dive. There are so many different facets to Christian parenthood. But as we wrap up, I'm curious, what would you say is the one big takeaway you're hoping our listeners walk away with today? For me, it's that reminder that Christian parenthood isn't about achieving this picture-perfect ideal that you see, out there sometimes.
Yeah, right.
It's about embracing the messiness, the challenges, those unexpected twists and turns, and trusting that God is with us every step of the way.
It's about letting go of that pressure to conform to some external standard and really focusing on that unique journey that God has called each family to, recognizing that there's no one right way to do this. Every family is different.
Right.
And God's grace is enough for all of us, no matter what our circumstances might be.
Absolutely. And I think the source material does a beautiful job of highlighting that diversity, that richness of experience within the Christian community. We see families formed through adoption, blended families, families who have chosen assisted reproductive technologies, all navigating the joys and challenges of parenthood with faith as their compass.
It really is like this tapestry, isn't it? All these different threads woven together.
Mhm.
And it creates this beautiful, intricate picture of what it means to be a family rooted in faith. And you know what I love? How the source material emphasizes that importance of community, of supporting one another on this journey. It's not something we're meant to do in isolation.
Right. We need each other. We need those mentors, those friends, those fellow believers who can offer encouragement, guidance, a listening ear when things get tough. Because let's be honest, they will get tough. Parenthood is hard work,
Oh, yeah. No matter how you slice it.
but it's also incredibly rewarding.
And that's where I think the source material really shines. It doesn't sugarcoat the challenges, but it also doesn't shy away from that profound joy and fulfillment that comes with raising children, with witnessing them grow and learn, discover their place in the world.
It's about celebrating those milestones, both big and small, cherishing those moments of laughter and connection, and holding on to hope even when things feel uncertain or overwhelming.
It's about trusting that God is working in and through our families, even when we can't see the bigger picture. And that's a message I think we all need to hear, no matter what stage of parenthood we're in.
So to our listener out there, wherever you are on your parenting journey, know that you're not alone. You've got a community of believers cheering you on, praying for you, walking alongside you. And most importantly, God is with you, guiding you, loving you every step of the way.
That's a beautiful thought to end on. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into Christian perspectives on parenthood. We hope you found it insightful, encouraging, and maybe even a little bit challenging.
We hope it sparked some meaningful conversations and reflections within your own families, because ultimately that's what this is all about, sharing our experiences, learning from one another, and growing together in faith.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep learning, and keep embracing that beautiful messiness of parenthood. We'll see you on our next deep dive.